Hi, my name is Bob Whitehair. I'm the Executive Director for the Center for National Investing. I'm also the author of the book American Buyout. And today I wanted to talk to you about the American Buyout Consortium. In particular, I want to talk to you about national vesting. National vesting is the program that we're promoting to provide and create an economy for everyone. To show you how national vesting works, I want to first explain how our existing economy works. I want to tell you about some of the mechanisms that you might not be aware of. You might be a little surprised at how our current economy functions and how it's managed. And then I'm going to show you how national vesting is going to build off those ideas to create an economy that works for everyone. So here we go. Today, economies all over the world use a mechanism called quantitative easing. The United States has used it. It's what we used to pull the United States out of the Great Recession of 2009. It was used in Europe. It was used all over the world. It's still in use in major economies around the world today, for example, Japan. So let me show you how quantitative easing works. This is a way you can stimulate the economy to create demand and to pull the economy out of a recession. So over here I have a little diagram. This is somewhat simplified, but surprisingly it's not really too different from how things actually work in the real world. The U.S. Treasury provides all the funds for government spending. So that's what this little dollar sign is supposed to represent here. Again, the U.S. Treasury provides all the money that is spent by the U.S. government. Where does that money come from? Some comes from taxes. But in the case of a recession, you spend extra money to try to stimulate demand, stimulate the economy. And the way that works is the U.S. government issues debt. So you may have heard that the U.S. government has a debt of something like 22 trillion or 23 trillion. It hardly matters, but it's an enormous number. People get worried because they think that this debt creates a burden on free markets. It sucks money out of the market, or it creates obligations that our children have to pay for, or something of that nature. That's not how it actually works. This debt is bought by the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is the central bank of the United States. It basically is a government agency. So what's happening to fund the U.S. government when you're doing quantitative easing, the U.S. Treasury issues debt. The debt is bought by an agency of the U.S. government, the Federal Reserve, so that the money that is being used to fund spending programs is coming not from markets. It's not a burden on the market. It's not a burden on your children or grandchildren. It's coming from the Federal Reserve. So the U.S. government creates debt, and then the U.S. government effectively retires the debt. So if you look, whatever big number you've heard of 22, 23, 24 trillion dollars, a great deal of that debt is currently owned by the U.S. government. So it's not quite what you might have thought. And this is the kind of look behind the curtain that is going to be important when we look at national vesting. Now, before I show you national vesting, let me show you how this kind of a mechanism can be used in the real world. If you're old enough, you might remember the Great Recession of 2009. The world was on the brink of collapse. Armageddon was a few days away. Things looked bad. The U.S. government implemented well over $1 trillion of quantitative easing to pull the U.S. economy out of the Great Recession. Here's one program that was used. It was called Cash for Clunkers. So just like with the quantitative easing, the U.S. Treasury issued debt. The debt was bought by the Fed. That gave the Fed dollars. That gave the U.S. Treasury dollars to spend. How were those dollars spent? Well, one program was called Cash for Clunkers. And the idea was pretty simple. If you had an old car, you could trade it in to buy a new car. So we'll show that with a simple arrow. And if you did that, you got a big rebate. The U.S. government provided a $4,500, something in that range, incentive for you to buy a new car. And that was one of the mechanisms that was used to stimulate demand to pull the United States out of the Great Recession of 2009. Now, this was a relatively small program. You know, the total amount of quantitative easing for multiple years was over $1 trillion per year. Remember that number, $1 trillion per year. So this is a pretty simple diagram, but it's not overly simplified. This is a pretty good representation of how things actually worked. What I'm now going to do is show you how ABOC's comprehensive program of national vesting is going to work. It's going to be a slight variation on this theme. And with that slight variation, our program of national vesting is going to be able to fund all of those benefits that we showed you a few moments ago.